that there is a cylinder seal about 4,000 years old showing this goddess, her name was Ninmah, raising the newborn model men, Lulu Amelu, as they called it. And she shouted, and these are words in those texts, "My hands have made it." That is, ladies and gentlemen, how we came about. This is the long story, which I gave you as briefly as I could, of what the Bible says in chapters 2 and others of Genesis, that a group called the Elohim, which is a plural term, literally meaning the lofty ones, translated God, said to each other, "Let us," in the plural, "let us fashion the Adam." Adam comes from Adamah, which is earth, so Adam, literally earthling. "Let us fashion the earthling in our image and after our likeness." And this is essentially, in one biblical verse, what the Sumerian tales tell in quite a number of creation texts. And then after they achieved that and everything seemed to be in order, the deluge came and destroyed everything. So after the deluge, there are tales, by the way, Sumerian tales describing the deluge and its reasons and its what caused it, and why was one God angry and said, "Let mankind perish," etc., etc. Well, that's it's another evening. So after the deluge, when the water subsided, they had to restruct and recreate and restart everything from the beginning, and they could not do it anymore in the Edin, today's Mesopotamia or Iraq, because it was all covered with millions, or now one should say billions, of tons of mud, and nothing could be done there until the earth would take generations and generations to dry. So they shifted the whole project from where it was. If you recall, it was this way. Everything was anchored on Mount Ararat, the twin peaks of Ararat, which stand out as a marker, and laid out exactly the same idea of a landing corridor this way. Now they used as one of the facilities to serve their purposes a great platform that they had built here and that survived the deluge right here. And again, using this notion of equidistance from there to the spaceport, which was here and here, to create the whole landing pattern, they chose a new mission control center, a new place for the Duran-Key, right here. And this place is known today as Jerusalem. Either at seminars or when I took groups with me to tour these places, I would say to them, why is Jerusalem sacred? I said, well, it is sacred to Muslims because the tale is that Muhammad was taken from Mecca or Medina one night on a winged horse and brought to Jerusalem, and there he was taken aloft and visited heaven for one night. So that's. But why was Muhammad taken to Jerusalem? Why wasn't he lifted just from Mecca or Medina? Well, because that place was already known as a sacred place, because the Christians believed that that's where Jesus preached and was crucified, etc. So I said, so why was Jesus crucified in Jerusalem? He was born in Bethlehem. He came from Nazareth. Why Jerusalem? Well, because that's where the temple was. The Jewish temple, the Temple of Solomon. So why was the Temple of Solomon there? Well, people don't know. So I tell them, well, it was there because the same Anunnaki who had this pattern and had Nippur as the navel of the earth and mission control center before the deluge, set up this layout and made Jerusalem mission control center after the deluge. And equidistant from it is the spaceport and Twin Peaks, emulating the Twin Peaks of Ararat. Twin Peaks are here in the Sinai Peninsula, and Twin Peaks, artificial ones, because there were no mountains there. So they built two mountains known as the Giza Pyramids. Now, things did not go so well after the reconstruction and the setting up of the alternate mission control center. The Anunnaki, who, according to the tales by Enki and others, were engaged in almost constant wars on their planet, had at the time a leader called Anu, but he was actually a usurper. He usurped the throne. And under the Sumerian sexagesimal system of 6 times 10, 60, etc., he ranked as the top rank 60. And his successor was a son called Enlil, who was given the rank 50. But Enlil was not the firstborn son. It was Ea, or Enki, as previously known as Ea, Enki, who was really the rightful successor, but he was demoted to rank matching the 12 members of the solar system and matching other 12 without belaboring it, 12 months of the year, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples of Jesus, and so on. So 12 was a celestial number. So the relationships were such that the conflict was almost inevitable, especially since it had a lot to do of who was mothered by whom, who was the father, who was the mother. If this one was also the son of Anu and Antu, then he was this rank. But if this one was only the son of this one, but not this queen, he had another rank. So the relationship was quite confused and convoluted and leading to conflict, which soon appeared on Earth. And one of the events that took place, relatively too many years after the establishment of that great pattern of landing pattern in Jerusalem and the Space Force, etc., and the two artificial mountains in Egypt, was that wars broke out. And the first war that I named in my book, The Wars of Gods and Men, the Pyramid Wars, because there was a series of them, had to do with these facilities, because in the Great Pyramid, one of the two especially, which is the only one that has an ascending passage and chambers, all the others have just a descending passage. they were a prize that one side tried to deprive from the other, and the first series of pyramid wars took place there. In that particular war, the two main protagonists were the main son of Enlil, called Ninurta, and the main son of Enki, called Marduk. And in that war, it was Ninurta who was the victor, and his victory was commemorated in some cylinder seals and other depictions. This was his symbol, the eagle, and this was his victory's depiction, how he won the war over the two pyramids, and another depiction where you see actually all three pyramids. And this, by the way, is another of the proofs, of which I have many, and I deal with it extensively, of who built the pyramids and when they were built, and that you see that already in Sumerian times, which preceded the pharaonic times by thousands of years, the existence of the pyramids was already known. Around 2900 BC, a Sumerian king. Now, the whole business of immortality doesn't really exist, because all the tales tell us that these so-called gods, the Anunnaki, were both born and died. And there are tales about both birth and death. But it is all relative. That's why the Greeks called the gods, they borrowed the Sumerian pantheon, they called them the immortals. But it was only a difference in what a year is. If the Anunnaki come from a planet whose orbit is about 3,600 of our years, to them it is 1 year. If you would ask an Anunnaki, how old are you? He'll say, whatever, I'm 20 years old, which means my planet, Nibiru, made 20 rounds around the sun. If you ask somebody here, so we won't ask people for their ages, of course, but you ask, how old are you? And he'll answer, it means my planet, where I grew up, to which I genetically belong, made X number of orbits around the sun. That's a year. So, but anyway, Gilgamesh was the son of a goddess. And he came to his mother, and he actually was not only a demigod, but he was 2/3 divine, because his mother, not his father, his mother was a god, a goddess. And he said, if I'm 2/3 divine, 2/3 Anunnaki genetically, why should I die like a mortal? And she said to him, you're right, but in order to attain our longevity, you have to go and be on our planet. So he went in search of immortality, and the Epic of Gilgamesh is a well-known literary work from antiquity, translated in antiquity already in many of those ancient languages. Now, where did Gilgamesh go in search of immortality? He had to go to places from which he would be taken aloft to the planet of the gods. So if you remember this design, this is what I showed you. This is Jerusalem, which is only mission control center. He had, and this one, where is it? This one was destroyed in the pyramid wars. So he had two places to go. One was the great platform in the mountains here, and one was the spaceport itself. And so around 2900 BC, almost 5,000 years ago, he went in search of a place to be taken aloft and join the gods on their planet. Now the first one that I showed you, this one, is in the mountains of Lebanon. The great cedar forest there is depicted and described in detail in the epic tale of Gilgamesh. And the text says that he witnessed on the night before he entered or tried to enter the place, he saw a rocket launched. And lo and behold, archaeologists have discovered a Phoenician coin from a place not far from there that shows the great platform and a rocket ship on a podium. And can be visited. I went there at some risk. I would not advise you to go at this time because it's the headquarters of the Hezbollah in Lebanon. But the place is called Baalbek, and there is there a vast stone platform of about 500,000 square feet. And here at this northwestern corner, there are ruins of temples built over temples over temples. The latest one are Muslim and Byzantine and Roman, but they're built on or over a platform that pre-existed. And these are some of the most ancient ruins that you see there, of levels that keep rising from down there, rising and rising and rising and rising and rising. And these stone blocks weigh between 600 to 900 tons each. And the immensity of the place is mind-boggling. Even more mind-boggling is one of the courses in the western wall of that enclave, on the western wall, on top of these huge boulders. And the three of them, 1, 2, and the third one, known as the Trilithon. This is the drawing, the image. This is a line drawing of a person, so you can see the scale. So there are three of these huge stone blocks lying in one of the courses, one of the levels, next to each other. And they weigh 1,100 tons each. Now, there is no piece of equipment, even today, that can lift 1,100 tons, or even 1,000 tons, or even 600 tons. There's no such piece of equipment. Yet, and this is a photograph, by the way, I think, can you see that little ant there? That's me. I'm standing there. And this is one, the first Trilithon, and then there are two more. Now we know where they came from, because about 1.5 miles away, there is the quarry from which those stone blocks were cut and lifted and brought. And one of them is unfinished. So right here it's still part of the native rock, and this part has been already cut. And again, this is me there. So you can see the size. So somebody in antiquity, and according to all the evidence before the flood, cut those stones and lifted them over 1.5 miles and put them there, not drop them on the ground, but put them exactly where they should be, where they belong. And the question is, what was the purpose of this whole thing? As I said, Gilgamesh reported that he saw a rocket ship launched there, and the Phoenician coin also depicted. And it was only after I saw photographs of about a year ago, I think, of the Chinese launching their spacecraft for the first time. Now, we are used to launch towers made of metal and so on, but this is also built out of some kind of stone. So I have no doubt that what we see there now, where's the one?